Federal officials say the successor to Osama bin Laden and a key planner of the September 11th terror attacks is dead. A Sunday CIA drone strike took out al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri. The 71-year-old terror plotter was hiding out in downtown Kabul, Afghanistan.
Officials say 2 Hellfire missiles killed al-Zawahiri while he stood on his balcony. They claim there were no civilian casualties. He's known as bin Laden's right-hand man. He took over the terror network after Navy SEALs killed bin Laden in 2011.
Joining us now to understand the significance of this death, Navin Bapat, political science professor at UNC-Chapel Hill. Always a pleasure, Professor, to spend time with you. Good morning.
Good to be with you. Good morning.
We were just talking in the break. This was a surprise. Didn't really see this coming. The timing certainly is interesting. Let's kind of start at the beginning. What do we know about this attack, this strike?
So the attack was done. I think there's 2 aspects of the attack worth sort of mentioning. First is that the location of Zawahiri is interesting, in that he was in an area in Kabul that tends to be populated by senior Taliban leadership. I think some of the rhetoric coming from the Taliban was that they agreed to not sponsor terrorist activity, but they never agreed to sever their complete ties with al-Qaeda, where they've had a long relationship. The second interesting thing is it demonstrates that the U.S. does have over-the-horizon capabilities, and that even though the United States is not physically in Afghanistan in terms of its military, it does have the ability to strike within Afghanistan. It can use precision munitions to hit some of the terrorist leaders that it needs to hit. So that does demonstrate that even though the United States is gone from Afghanistan, it still has capabilities in the region.
Al-Zawahiri is not necessarily a household name. We all are familiar with Osama bin Laden, but this man was equally on the same level as bin Laden. Who was he, and who is now gone?
So that's a really interesting question. Zawahiri was now in charge of al-Qaeda since bin Laden's death. He was bin Laden's sort of partner. He was one of the plotters of 9/11. He had worked with bin Laden pretty extensively. Where he was different was that charismatically he was not bin Laden. And when we looked to some of the other members of al-Qaeda, they were not as willing to cooperate with him as they were with bin Laden. So one of the strategies he followed was to try to give regional entities, regional cells, a lot more autonomy. So in some ways, his strategy kept al-Qaeda together, but it also weakened it.
What do we know about the allegiance to him? I mean, now that he's gone, that doesn't mean, oh, well, the whole operation is shut down. I mean, the stronger the allegiance, the quicker you have someone rise to fill that spot. What do we know about that?
Well, some of al-Qaeda's senior leadership are dead. That the United States has been able to target them with drone strikes. They will likely find a successor, but what's important to really follow with al-Qaeda is not the activity in Afghanistan, though certainly that has some meaning, especially when it comes to those that participated in the 9/11 attack. The key activity for al-Qaeda will likely come in the regional cells, especially with AQAP. With al-Shabaab, with some of the other affiliates that are out there in the world. Those are the ones that are really doing most of the driving of this organization.
And what does this assassination speak to the intelligence streams that are still out there? From what we've gathered and what's been leaked or released, there were people watching his every move to kind of watch his pattern and look for the opportune time to execute this.
Right. Again, I think what this demonstrates is the capability of the United States is still quite significant globally. That the United States, although again not physically there with its military, still has intelligence assets that it can use to leverage in Afghanistan, and still has intelligence assets in the region, and still has a whole lot of capability that it can bring to bear. So the United States might be physically gone from Afghanistan, but still has the ability to strike there when it pleases. And they're really, in terms of the defenses that the Taliban have, they cannot stop U.S. drone strikes. So the U.S. has that capability, and the question will be, how often is the United States going to do this? This brought condemnation from the Taliban, and that the United States had violated the Doha Agreement. But Secretary Blinken also said that given that he was where he was, the Taliban were also violating the Doha Agreement. So I think it remains to be seen what happens going forward with that.
This is certainly a good decision, I guess you could say, from the United States. The United States flexing its military muscles here. Do you think the Taliban, though, do you think al-Qaeda, do you think they will receive, how do you think that they will receive this strike? What do you think they'll do with it?
Well, again, I think how they received it is that the United States violated the terms of the peace agreement, that it violated the Doha agreement. So what they will likely do, there's not much that they can do in terms of building an air defense. There's not much that they can do to stop the U.S. from exercising its capability within the country. What they will likely do is to continue to work with some of these groups. This might bolster some ties between the Taliban and al-Qaeda, but a key thing to remember is that the Taliban is a fractured organization. There's lots of different competing elements. They're also dealing with ISIS in their country, so they have significant problems. And al-Qaeda is fairly, within Afghanistan, fairly weakened. So how much that really matters, I'm not sure.
Do we have any idea of when al-Zawahiri went into Afghanistan, or how long he's been there? And given the U.S. withdrawal 11 months ago, I mean, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that.
Right. It's possible. I'm not very sure as to when he made his way into Afghanistan. The intelligence that had been existing was that he was in the border regions of Pakistan. He probably did go in there after the United States withdrew, after the Taliban consolidated control. That would be my guess. That happened after. But the sort of the positive side of that, if you will, is that he also became more exposed once he did do that.
What does this mean for neighboring countries, Southern Asia, the relationships there, the relationships with the U.S.? Does it put a strain? Does it strengthen allegiances? What does it do to the rest of the region?
So I think that the interesting thing is, like, right now, if we look at Pakistan, so there's been several interesting dynamics since the end of the war in Pakistan, and this is the key one because this relates to the Taliban's ability to work here. There's an element of the Taliban, which is the Pakistani Taliban, that is fighting the Pakistani government, and the Taliban have tried to some extent to mediate that, even though they seem to be more on the side of the Pakistani Taliban, which is against the Pakistan government that helped them for several years. So what this might do is to disrupt that peace process to some extent, or those negotiations to some extent. So that's one potential fallout in the neighboring areas, I would say. Is
there a name or a person that will likely rise to fill the role of al-Zawahiri, and who is that person?
So I think it's Zaif al-Adil would be one potential candidate. He's been with al-Qaeda for some time. He worked with bin Laden. Sometimes he disagreed with bin Laden, but he still followed bin Laden's orders. He was quite different than Zawahiri, so he would be a possibility. And there may be others, but again, some of the senior leadership has already been wiped out. So they would have to find someone, I think, down a tier, but he would be one candidate, I think.
And at the end of the day, would you classify this as a counterterrorism win?
Yes, I think from the United States perspective, this is certainly a success. In terms of what it does to terrorism globally, probably less. In terms of the symbolic value and the victory within Afghanistan itself, I think it is significant.
And we've been spending time with Navin Bapat there. I think the Zoom pros. Oh, we
there
got you still there.
We
thank you for your time this morning, helping us break down and understand the significance of this attack. And I'll be curious to see in the next couple of weeks if it changes any approval numbers for the president. The timing certainly is interesting. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.